Hi, I'm Eugene Mulero with Transport Topics, and joining us today is Ariel Wittenberg, transportation and water reporter at E&E News. And Ariel, thank you for being here.
Of course.
There's been a lot of talk in the industry about autonomous vehicles. I just came back from a conference in Denver where lawmakers from the western states were talking about efforts to ensure that the driver is still a part of autonomous technologies in the years to come. And on Capitol Hill, before Congress adjourned, we had a series of hearings where they talked about autonomous technology and industry raised some concerns. Can you talk about some of your takeaways of even the most recent hearing on autonomous technology?
Right, so there have been 3 hearings on autonomous vehicles in the past couple of months. And I think the takeaway is really that, NHTSA came out with this guidance in part because they don't want to regulate just yet. They want to see what the automakers, and in addition to the tech companies, are doing. They want to see what the best way is to move forward with this technology before they put out any rules on it. And Congress seems to be supporting that, but I think there are a few members who are nervous, especially about states who see these cars on their roads and want to ensure the safety of their citizens and who are moving forward with their own regulations in absence of federal regulations.
So in what we're hearing from industry is the need for a federal patchwork, not an individual 50 little patches on this policy. Mm-hmm. From what you're talking about and your reporting, how long before we can see either the Trump team moving to our direction of really put together some rulemaking on this?
Right. Well, I think the setup they have right now is just to update that guidance we talked about on an annual basis. I think the first thing that we may end up seeing come in a regulation is this 15-point safety assessment plan that right now NHTSA is just asking of automakers, tell us how you would address cybersecurity, tell us how you would address ethics, and it's optional right now. But they have said that that is potentially the first place that they might move forward with a regulation. Interestingly, that's a place where California, we're talking about states moving into this space, has in their proposed rule for autonomous vehicles in their states has said you have to submit us this 15-point safety assessment that NHTSA has asked you for. And there's a lot of pushback from automakers saying, well, that's backdoor rulemaking. The state shouldn't be requiring of us something that the feds say is optional.
And one of the takeaways that I got was when I heard last week the top Democrat on the Highway Subcommittee in the House, Eleanor Holmes Norton of Washington, D.C., when she says that she basically acknowledged that Congress is behind industry when it comes to this technology, because that's something I heard a lot when I went to Denver for the Western States Transportation Alliance conference. We already have autonomous cars, and we've already seen pilot projects from truck companies already doing shipments without a person driving the car. There's a person in the cab, but not necessarily operating the entire thing. So when you talk to industry and experts, what is their perspective on where Congress is in all this?
Right, I think that a lot of folks have been surprised by how fast this technology has moved forward. I think if you ask people 3 years ago, will you have autonomous vehicles driving around in Pittsburgh, they wouldn't have expected that to happen. And so I think in a lot of ways, we're in this space where it's moving, the technology is moving very rapidly, and regulators in the states are starting to get nervous about it. There were some signs, I think, in the hearings that specific members of Congress are getting a little nervous that maybe we should figure out how to regulate this. But NHTSA, again, is hoping to still take a step back and see, let's ask automakers in this 15-point assessment plan how they plan to deal with these issues so we can look at their responses and figure out if there's a commonality, an agreement industry-wide of best practices here that we can move forward with.
Autonomous is going to be an issue. There's going to be a waiting. The new Secretary of Transportation, most likely Elaine Chao, during the Trump years. And then another thing that we're watching in the industry is Donald Trump's pick to run the EPA, and that is Scott Pruitt, who is Oklahoma's Attorney General. Who is Scott Pruitt?
So as you mentioned, Scott Pruitt is Oklahoma's Attorney General, and he's an interesting pick because he is an Attorney General who has actually sued the EPA on multiple occasions to various success. His biggest successes have been he's part of a number of people who have sued over the Clean Power Plan, who have sued over the Clean Waters of the U.S. regulation, both of which have been stayed by the court. For our purposes in transportation, he was also one of a number of attorneys generals who sued the EPA 5 or 6 years ago over their finding that greenhouse gases are a pollutant, which is the basis, which he didn't win, but that finding was the basis of the greenhouse gas part of CAFE standards. So there is a lot of speculation now. He's going to be on the inside in EPA, assuming he's confirmed. Is that finding something that he would want to roll back? And how would he do that? And for our purposes, again, how does that impact CAFE standards? Of course, CAFE standards is also fuel economy. So even if you take out the greenhouse gas aspect, you still would have fuel economy targets. But that's something a lot of people, especially in the energy and environment world, are watching on him.
It's worth noting that my understanding, if it's not an executive privilege, an executive mandate, that an agency director cannot just begin to undo certain regulation, that the agencies have to go through the whole process of rulemaking, to introduce a rulemaking to undo a rule or to oversee a rule.
Right, that's absolutely correct. And that's one reason on the light duty vehicle spectrum we've seen that's under a midterm review right now. And the current EPA put out their final determination that they don't want to do a new rulemaking to adjust the standards, either to make them stricter or more lenient. They put that determination out a few months before what had originally been predicted. They originally said it might be in April. It came out last month. And because of the timing of that midterm review could be completed just before Trump's inauguration. So if that midterm review is completed, then you're right, there would have to be another rulemaking process that Scott Pruitt and his EPA would have to start to roll back the CAFE standards if that's what he wanted to do.
And when we talk about the other aspects of what EPA oversees, the permitting of construction projects, this is something that an environmental review can take a year, 2, sometimes longer, depending on the terrain. When I see senators weighing in on the EPA nominee, there's going to be a push from Republicans who are going to note that the Trump administration is going to be more relaxed when it comes to the environmental permitting process. Is that something that you're hearing from your sources?
Yep, absolutely. And also, I mean, in the FAST Act, the transportation reauthorization that happened last year, already there were measures in that to streamline the NEPA environmental permitting process. It gives a bit more flexibility in terms of how much comment period the EPA or other agencies would need or require. It could combine various documents as part of the NEPA process in order to streamline the timeline on that.
So not only that, we have the cabinet nominees in the 115th Congress, and we already saw in Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's press conference this week a clear indication of what the leader would like to see from the Trump administration on infrastructure plan, basically saying something that shies away from the Obama 2009 so-called stimulus package and something that is revenue neutral and doesn't contribute to the deficit. So from my vantage point, that was the first time that I saw the Senate leader just put a mile marker and say, this is what we're looking for, where prior to that, we saw very little from McConnell on the Trump campaign's $1 trillion investment proposal.
Right, and this is an area that Democrats, Chuck Schumer has said there could be common ground in terms of an infrastructure package. Whether Democrats are going to go for a purely financing package, which is the $1 trillion plan, or want to add some more funding into that, I think is one area that a fight could be about in Congress next year.
Ariel, thank you so much for joining us. Check out all her reporting on E&E News. And for the latest on Capitol Hill when Congress is in session, check out ttnews.com on Tuesday. Thank you.